first thing you want to realize, guys, is that, big town, small town, big city, whatever, doesn't matter. The thing is, the issue is, we want to make sure that we keep an abundance mindset. Well, how do you do that? I live in a small town. Or how do I do that? I'm confined to a one-horse town, or I live in on a job that I'm always moving around, right? How do you create the abundance mindset? Well, some people say, there's no number game, no such thing as numbers game in dating. Well, there's always a numbers game, if you ask me, in my opinion, because you know why? And I'll explain it. Because the numbers game is a ratio, right? Whether you talk to somebody or you don't, the minute you do, there's a ratio being administered, right? That's just the law of numbers, law of averages, right? So to say there's not a numbers game, then you're not trying, right? Then if you're not talking to anybody and you're going your own way, that kind of thing, then sure, it's a great ratio. It's 0-0, right? Then you go, boom, there's still a ratio. So what you gotta understand, the first rule of sales when it comes to relationships and dating and all this is that scarcity creates value, right? So in other words, if you're in a large city and you're dating, you're asking women out here and there, and you're doing this and doing that. Even in big cities, guys, need to understand, even in big cities, you're still nobody in a city of big people, right? Sure, the velocity is a little different, the dynamic is a little different because you got more foot traffic in a big city, whereas, of course, in a small town or a one-horse town, you have very little options. Now, I'm going to go back to that, but before I get to that point, check this out. The dynamic between both big city and a small city, because a one-horse town is extreme, right? A big city is extreme when it comes to having all the abundance, right? Because it's the same thing. When you don't play where you stay. I've been in the South. I've dated in a city. I've dated in the South. I didn't have a problem either way, guys, and I'll explain that too. I'll expand on that a little bit, but let's take it from the top. So what I'm saying here is the ratio you create is the mindset. If you're going out, for example, you're in a small town, you want to go out. Now, for someone that lives in a big city, the next town over may have more girls than your town. The funny thing about that is, even in a big town or a big city or whatever, the same thing. We don't date the girls in our school. We date girls from other high schools. Our girls are ugly. They're not ugly. They're all the same thing, but most times you don't play where you stay, right? So if you're in a small one-horse town and you want to stay there, it's a farm homestead, it's a family thing or whatever, then for you to go to the next town, that could be an hour away, 2 hours away. Now, for someone from a metropolitan city, they may say, wow, 2 hours to go see a girl, that's ridiculous. Different town, that's ridiculous. However, if you're from the country, 2 hours is nothing. That's a country mile, right? Or two. So it's all about perspective, right? So if you were in a one-horse town, let's say you had to go to another town where they had a bunch of women there, you can either move there if you're really set on trying to change or trying to date in a serious manner, or if you're just trying to hang out, have fun, and do a little this, little bit of that, then sure, you go there, you hang out, maybe stay overnight, a hotel, whatever you do, and then you come back, a couple of friends or whatever, and you have things organized. It's a field trip, right? The idea at that point would be to bring somebody that's going to actually get attached to you or whatever, and then maybe she comes see you back and forth. You want a relationship, whatever, fine. There's some advantages also to this small town, right? Say, for example, you're in a military town, right? A military town is not good. This is more realistic because a one-horse town is extreme, right? It is what it is. The people that are already there, and you have to go out your way and all that. We get that part. Let's talk about some realisms here. Now, realistically, small towns like military towns, for example. That's a perfect example. The women there, you know, chances are there's going to be more women in a military town because most of the guys that are local townies, they don't want to deal with those guys. And the military guys, half the guys in the military town are on deployment, where the other half is still coming in. One group's coming in, one group's going out, right? So the women, you know, the men, it depends on the location, oftentimes will have the abundance, especially someone in the military, because the women are townies, right? And they tell you before you even leave the base, they give you this breakdown about the townies and the community. Same thing like the athletes do, like the baseball, basketball, these athletes, they did the same thing when it comes to their players. Before once they're in town, they're in training camp, they break it down about, you know, protecting themselves and that, right? So, be that as it may, my point is this: if you live in a town where there are more women than men, you have an abundance, right? How does that happen? A lot of times, and that happens in a small city or a big city, and I'll explain that too. Oftentimes, big cities become, because they all break down to small communities, right? Especially these big cities are diverse, right? Ethnically, all diverse and different colors and flavors and foods, where you can travel from one side of town and get Italian food. Another side of town, Mexican food. Another side of town, you get Greek and you get your Savaki, chicken Savaki, right? And then another town you go and you'll get empanadas. Another town you'll go, you'll get baked German cakes or chocolate, etc. So these are small sections as well. Different languages, different tongues. You get some Indian food somewhere, blah, 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 Chinese food, all that, right? So those are also small sections. So no matter what part of the city you come from, you go to those areas, you're not bagging all the chicks, but you're still, again, the ratio begins again. The idea is this: if you're in a big city, right, even your local building, if you live in a project building, everyone knows you, right? So you still you can play in that project building for a while. You know, if you are popular, then yes, right? But if you're trying to run some kind of game or whatever, and chances are you're going to go to the next building, even if it's across town to another town where the buildings are. So the women are there. Chances are also, guys, that, you know, some towns, some cities that have, some sections of cities have more women than men, and vice versa. So a lot of times, tough neighborhoods, right, they'll have a bit more men than women, right? Because why? Chances are the parents will either have, if they're having children, they have girls and whatever, they decide to move to another location or put the girls in Catholic school or boarding school or something like that. So again, they take their women, the females, out the environment. That leaves a lot of guys. On the flip side, depending on the neighborhood, a lot of time guys don't stay out. They have to go on vacation, right? That creates more women, right, for that same situation, even in a rough neighborhood. So the ratios will always vary, guys. All right, take for example, if you were to live in Alaska, there's more men to female ratio. Women have the choice over there. They'll date around. They may have more than one guy because they set the standard over there. They get to call the shots. Why? Most of the time, those guys also are in the military, that kind of thing. Also, with military towns, a lot of these guys that are from the town or from a small town, the guys that from small towns, there's not enough girls, so they leave. Maybe they do go to college or they join the military. And then when it comes to that, half the time those guys stay. They don't come back. Or they don't come back alone. And the girls that are in that small town are left abandoned. Some of them go to college, but some of them come back, right? And some of them will go out. But the idea here is that the ratio is always going. If you're in a small town, you go where there's foot traffic. If it means you're moving or changing your location, so be it. If you don't want to change your location and you want things the way it is, then you really can't complain. Work with what you have, right? There's still women there, but you have to be, a little more meticulous. You may have to go out of town a little bit, but you still got to do the research. You got to do the work, put the work in. for, you know, if you have a scarcity mindset, you fail to see the solutions. You rather find more problems. That's the bottom line, guys. So I found myself personally that whenever I went across the globe, home, small town, big town, I went. Matter of fact, guys, if you go to California, there's more men to women ratio in California. You wouldn't think so, but it is. New York, for example, is 94 to 100 is the ratio. 94% men to 100 women in New York. Can you believe that? And in California, it's 99 to 100. So you would think it would be the opposite, but no. North Carolina is another one of those southern bells. Those states, there's a lot more women than men in those situations. Again, that's probably military base. Some guys are farmers. If they do get away, they marry their wives and they marry someone local, or they get out of town. Okay, a lot of people go to college to get away in these middle America and everywhere else to get away, actually. So the idea, though, is that there's always a ratio going, guys. You got to have a positive mindset. If you can't find a solution, you're not looking for one. You're trying to find a problem, and you'll always be stuck saying that this life's not fair and there's not enough this, there's not enough that. Everything's here if you're looking for it. You know, I haven't seen that. I haven't found any problems. And this is when I'm like 18. So for me being 18 and not knowing anything and still going to these different places, like I said, I really didn't see a difference personally. I always saw the options and I took them. So I suggest if you see the options, you take them. For example, if you were to go to Philippines, right? There's more women in the Philippines. Latvia, more women there. Croatia, a lot of women there. Now, you know, of course, Ukraine was already on the map before, but now it's going to be higher on the map. Why? Because of wars. These are World War II residue. Some of them never really recovered, and a lot of men are lost in war. Some guys, U.S. based, they're lost in incarceration, right? Women have all these. There's a lot going on, guys. As you go to, like I said, places like Alaska, there are places where there's a lot more men than women, and a lot of times those are those obscure military bases, right? Hawaii and different places like that. So, and the women they still call the shots, and you have to put up with it. You know, if you got to share her or whatever, you got to be okay with that. Period. Unless you find someone that's going to be extra special, extra different. If not, especially if you're in the military, you don't get wrapped up in that. You just do what you got to do and then wait for your moment to leave, and you do that, such as, you know, you leave. But bar none, man, you should be putting that work in anyway, and having that abundance mindset. Because when you have the abundance mindset, it's going to show up in your attitude. It's going to show up in your walk, in your body language, in the way you move, guys. So, you know, women can see through all that, you know. So, listen, guys, like, subscribe, comment below. When you hear your family, I got you. Excel, and I'm out.